So I have asked, Geary and I have been connected for a while, and we've had some really fascinating conversations around all things pandemic. And I've definitely recommended his book to more than one person. So he was nice enough to come on and talk to us today. So Geary, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, it's a pleasure. So we have had some conversations around some maybe some lesser talked about aspects of COVID-19. So when we're talking about things like development and production around the vaccination, so most of us seem to be fairly aware of things like research and clinical trials related to the vaccines. But what are some of the unseen aspects of that development and production that we might not be aware of?
I think it's a lot of complexity with regards to the production aspect. So you've got the development of the vaccine, the liquid vaccine, if you will, but now you've got the complication of the quantity, quality, the then storage, not just the storage of the finished product in super cold storage, but the parts. So you need vials, you need the caps, you need the seals, you need to make sure that there's ample amount of syringes to go. So the chain becomes much more complex when we talk about production. People, I think, simplify thinking, well, they can produce a vaccine, we should be able to get it. It is much more complicated because you've got all these little moving parts, if you will, and it's bringing them together to create a final product that we have to begin to look at and realize the complexity that we face.
No, those are great points. So now that we're going to approach that actual release date, which we're looking at mid-December for allowing it and then dispersing it and then getting everyone in. So mid-December, we're kind of looking at, I think, what all went into making that happen from like a transportation, storage, distribution standpoint.
That is where I find the real interest right now, because when we talk about this, you start to look at the complexity again of the supply chain. Now, we've talked about the United Airlines flight from, I think it was London to Chicago, that brought initial shipments into the country here. But the complexity of distribution throughout the country becomes major. So we look at the issue of transportation. How are we going to transport it? Not just the air transport, which is maybe the easiest aspect, but what about the remote aspects once you start transporting it from airports out to communities? So you've got the logistics of overland transportation. How does that process work? You might even find that a FedEx, Amazon model needs to be applied with regards to the transportation and delivery to the end users, if you will. And then you've got the issue of the super remote areas where we begin to start to look at, it's difficult to get there by air. They may not be able to have land transportation until you're there locally. How do you ship it by sea? Those things become super, super complex when we start talking about the actual distribution because of the issues of storage with some of the vaccines and the what I'll call shelf life of many of these, because they don't have a long shelf life. Pfizer shelf life on their vaccine, once it's out of the super cold storage, is very short. And that may be 5 days at an optimum point, if you will. So it's 5 days at a facility that can maintain a certain quality of storage. What do we do about the facilities that maybe don't have that capability? So that's another challenge that we face.
Absolutely. So,
Yep.
so let's think in a perfect world, we get all the vaccines to the doctor's offices and the hospitals and the places they need to go, and we have this really brilliant method for deciding who gets them first. Who do you anticipate is going to like want this or not want this? So, like in the cyber realm, as well as everywhere else, there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation, even conspiracy theories that are related to the vaccines and the potential requirements for receiving them. So, who seems the most likely, in your opinion, to refuse the vaccine?
I would say that that is probably a big spectrum of people who potentially would refuse. There will be those because of uh, being naive or a lack of knowledge will refuse. There'll be those who traditionally don't get vaccinated for simple things like the flu that will resist. There will be those who will not get the vaccine based on religion. So you've got a spectrum. I couldn't say that there's one specific, profile that would be representative. So you've got this vast spectrum of people who could potentially fall into the what I'll call the resistance pool.
No, that's interesting. I know that there's a lot of talk now with the chairman of Pfizer coming out and being asked point blank how this is going to protect us and this is going to create immunity for everyone going forward. And there being really no guarantees associated with it, both from a pure immunity standpoint as well as a transmission standpoint, right? So just because you take a vaccine doesn't mean you can't touch something and spread it.
Yeah, that's the interesting piece. These are things that are coming out as we see this move forward, the push to, have everyone vaccinated. And suddenly the realities are now saying maybe it's not as final a a fix, if you will, for the situation. That yes, we've got a vaccine, but and it's 95 or 90% or however much percentage, but that there's no guarantee you can't continue to spread the virus, and there's no guarantee that you can't get it if you've been cured of it. It's one of the things right now, people who have had mild cases, they're finding that they are susceptible of getting, the coronavirus again. And so I think that the reality is that we are dealing with a very, very difficult virus, and there's no quick fix to the situation. Another thing that we have to consider with regards to the distribution and whatnot, the normal, what I'll call normal events, facilities that are inadequate to store the vaccine, any kind of general human error or mistakes that are going to be made, accidents, vehicles transporting could be involved in an accident of some sort, which disrupts that whole process. And then you've got the issue of theft, because this presents an opportunity for criminals in many ways. So combine that with the fact that you've got some undercurrent of of a resistance, that people are looking at not wanting to take the vaccination because of concerns, with its conspiracies, religion, or any number of reasons. And then we've got what I'll call overlooked populations, and there are two or three that I look at here. What I'll call the underground population, which consists of those people who are unfortunately here illegally, the homeless, and then those who are in uh, a mobile status, so not quite homeless, but not quite, in a home situation. How do you get to those folks?
No, those are all great things. I don't want to stop. Let's keep on going. So we'll just wrap up part one and then we'll just go on to a part two. So everybody make sure to catch the second part.